morning, everyone. Welcome to Orion Online. We are live here at the Orion campus, and my name is Christopher Cook. I'm part of the team here at Orion. We're so glad that you've tuned into today's service because I'm really excited. Craig's bringing a powerful, necessary word, and I'm excited for that. So here's the deal. Lean in, get your Bible, get a notebook, get ready to participate and enjoy service today. And here she is. Hi.
Wow, I'm a little bit late. But
You're good.
I'm very excited for this morning. It's going to be a great message on rest and Sabbath and things that I don't do very well on. So I'm going to be paying attention. I've got some notes here I'm going to be taking, and I'm ready. What else do you want to say?
That's really it, because I've got to get to the stage.
Oh, well,
So,
need to get busy too then. So you guys get ready. We've got a great message, and we'll see you soon.
yeah, absolutely. Enjoy. From our team to your house. Enjoy. Bye.
Good morning, Kensington. Would everybody be willing to stand with us as we begin to lead worship this morning?
You are close like no other. morning. Hey, anybody else, like, Kaylee, when you sing, like, you get to these, like, high places, like, I could never go to, and then, like, you sing lower than I can even sing. Like, your voice is such a gift to all of us. Y'all agree? All right, go ahead and, hey, before you sit down, just turn to somebody near you and just say good morning. Let them know you're glad that they're here, that you're here. Morning, Scott. Well, I see, Seth, you've decided to move a few rows in. Have I called you out too much in the front row lately? Yeah, you're not going to get away from it this morning either. Hopefully you guys got your coffee, or in my case, you got a tea, you got a bagel. Are you guys thankful for the team that does that every week? They're here early, putting together all the coffee. So great. 85 of you are happy, the rest are not. You know what I was thinking? The only thing that would make it better is if it was like, what's a movie theater where like the ones where you like have the cushy seats and the, what is it? Imagine, thank you. Yeah. You know how you can order food and they bring it to your seat? Like that'd be the only thing that would make it better is if you could like put in an order, like midway through the service, somebody comes in with a coffee and a bagel for you, like, here you go, it's seat number 8B. And you're like, awesome. I don't know. What's that? Recliners are nice too? Yeah, that's a capital campaign, dude. You don't want to go there. We're not doing that. All right, tons of announcements, and I'm eating up all my time right now to get through them. Lots of things to let you know about. I will also start off by saying this. I sat in the seats a couple weeks ago with my family, just did like the normal go to church thing, and Sam Anderson had a list of announcements to get through, and there was one point where my ADD just could not handle it anymore, and my wife was even elbowing me. She's like, pay attention in church. I was like, what am I, like 5 again? I'm like, there's too many things and details, and I'm gonna do that same thing today. Only because this place is amazing, and there are so many things constantly going on, especially this time of year. We just have a lot of things happening, so if you'll hang with me for a minute, just some of the things I want to tell you about, I'm hoping that for most of you, they will be things that as you step into them, it will create for you what we just sang about, an experience of seeing that the love of God is running after you. So here's a couple of them. Number one is we have our Thanksgiving baskets coming up next weekend. If you have not been a part of this, it's one of the coolest things that we do, whether through donating to it or through actually being involved in helping take the baskets. It's an incredible experience. Last year, my wife and I and our kids did it for the first time with Orion. Some of the times you get to just drop food off. Maybe people aren't there, and there's other occasions where you get to actually have an interaction and a conversation and just have a meaningful moment of being a joy and a gift to somebody in our community. So definitely want to invite you to be a part of this. All you got to do is scan that or just go to the website and you can see all that you need to see about how to be involved. We have our annual tree lighting coming up here, first Wednesday of December, which will be the 2nd. So December 2nd, we have our tree lighting that's going to take place as our midweek service. This year it's going to be a little bit different because we're actually going to have some of it happen in the building. In previous years, it's all been exclusively outside. But this year, we're going to try and engage our kids a little bit more. So we're going to start in here. We're going to have a great time together. We're going to have food out in the lobby, and then we're going to be moving outside to light the tree. And this year, what will be uniquely different is it will be the first time we're going to do it on our green space outdoors. So the grass is growing, the ground is firming up, and so we plan to have that tree wrapped with enough lights that they're going to see it in Clinton Township. So we're going to light that thing up together on the 2nd. So definitely be here, be a part of that with us. What else do we have? You know what? This is so boring. Nobody wants to hear me just stand up here. Can I come down? Can I talk to you guys? Do you guys know about the women's brunch thing? I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to sit. This is my family for this service here. We have a women's brunch thing coming up. It's, it's my cheat screen is up there though. So, all right. We have a Christmas Advent women's brunch coming up. Here's what's really cool about this. Number one, it's for our women. Number two, there is a guest speaker at this. Any guesses who it is? I'll give you one clue. It's a woman. I just happen to think she is the most beautiful woman in all of Orion. Any guesses? Yeah, that's a good pick. Because it could have got me in trouble if you said anything else. So that's going to be on December 3rd. That's going to be right here. So you guys, if you've not been to that yet, not guys as in guys, but gals, if you haven't been to that yet, this is one of the greatest events that we do. You're going to want to be there. I'm particularly partial to my wife who's speaking, so you want to be at that. All right, I got to turn around now. Even though I'm here, I got to go here for a minute. What else do we have? I think I hit it. Did I get it all? I ran the list. All right. So a couple of things we'll tell you guys about in a few minutes, but the thing I want to do right now, I'm going to go back up. Thanks for letting me borrow your family row for a minute. We are so grateful of all the things that God allows us to do and be a part of as a church. And one of the things that we do in response to that is every year, starting right now, all the way through the end of the year, is that we will take time to celebrate every single weekend some of the incredible things that God is doing through this community as a result of you, as a result of your generosity, as a result of your serving, as a result of your passion, as a result of many of you chasing after the things that God has wired you to do and gifted you to do. And one of those things is a very particular ministry, our care ministry, that meets the needs of so many people at different points in their life where there's just pain and suffering, where we don't have the ability to journey the road alone. And so we just want to take a minute and just show you a story of one of our families who the care ministry was able to meet a little bit of the needs of as they journey through a painful season of life.
Well, hello, Kensington, and hello, Sam.
Hey.
We're excited to come to you
We are.
Right before Thanksgiving,
I
actually.
know.
Although you can see we got the Christmas vibe going
So
already.
here's my question for you. Do you give Thanksgiving its proper due, or do you go from Halloween straight to Christmas?
I'm a total Thanksgiving guy. I love to take the time to get family around the table, enjoy a good
Absolutely.
meal.
Absolutely. That's our house, too.
Watch the Lions lose. You know?
I mean, it's tragic, but yes, it happens.
So anyhow, we're excited to share with you today a story right from our own community here. Church is so much more than what we do on Sundays. It's easy to define it about the weekend gatherings, but the reality is that the actual work of the body of Christ is found in 7 days a week as we just do life together.
It's true. And all of that stuff is made possible. Our care ministries are all the things that we have going on here at Kensington, whether it be local or regional or global, is only made possible because of your generosity, your consistent partnership on mission. And we just want to thank you guys for that.
And so right now we want to introduce you to Matt and Emily, who were able to access the resources that we provided through our care ministries to walk with them through a challenging time in life.
Sammy was our son. He was a joy to be around all the time. He was very animated.
He was a goofball, for sure.
Yeah.
Very verbal from a super young age. He was into just kind of a bunch of different ventriloquism and all these things that
Music.
just...
Cool music, too. Yeah.
He wasn't into, like, kid stuff. He was into, like...
Nirvana.
I would play and he would sing with me, and we'd have a lot of fun with that.
He just really loved life. In 2019, in July, he died unexpectedly. It was a traumatic event for our family, and they thought they'd be able to get him back, but they never were able to, so, yeah.
It was very sudden, very unexpected, and we were in shock at that time.
Yeah.
Didn't know where to go.
I remember my first night laying in bed. I just remember feeling like envisioning myself running to God. Like, I knew that's what I needed to do in this moment, is to just let him embrace me and get me through this.
I was lying in bed kind of between consciousness and sleep, and I just saw something with my eyes closed that I couldn't really understand at the time, but there was a feeling of kind of serenity, and just I saw a man in a robe leading a little boy up to the gates of heaven, was my interpretation of it. But the color and the feeling was nothing, wasn't like anything I've ever experienced. So, and I think in that moment I needed that.
Thankfully, my mom and my brother were there to support us through that. You get up and you go through the motions, you don't, a lot of crying.
Yeah.
A lot of crying.
You just can't stop
Yeah.
crying. You're in shock too, so there's this flow between bawling and numbness. It's hard to explain. It's just
Yeah.
complete shock and sorrow, like I've never felt before. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
More than emotional pain, it's physical pain as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like in your heart, you can feel it in your soul.
Mm-hmm. From the very beginning, Matt and I decided we're going to get through this. We are going to rely on God. We are going to look for resources for ourselves and our family. As soon as we heard about Grief Share, we of course looked it up and emailed and found out when the next session was, and we knew we needed something faith-based to get us through this. For me, walking into Grief Share the first time, I was so thankful for Renee. She was exactly who I needed to see. She was very welcoming. She also has lost a child, and I remember when she embraced me and greeted me thinking, wow, if she's up there doing this and helping other people, then maybe we can too. Maybe there is hope in this. Maybe I won't feel like this for the rest of my life. Each week you watch a video, there's a workbook that you do during the week, and that really helped me think through and use some scripture to kind of guide me through my grief.
Through the progressing weeks, you see laughter, you see camaraderie at each small group, and you see bonds being formed. I think Grief Share is a great tool for teaching you how to walk with the pain and still walk with Jesus in the pain. Staying close to God in that moment, in those weeks right after grief. It's hard to do, but Grief Share keeps you in the Word. It keeps you in community with other Christians or with other people that are coming to Christ through Grief Share. It was June or something, and I think Renee just reached out to me and asked, maybe this is something you might want to do. But I wasn't sure about it, and I had kind of prayed on it. And I remember walking outside around that time, and in our garden, there was a bright blue feather kind of stuck upright into one of them, which was, Sammy used to like to collect feathers and rocks and stuff. So I took that as a sign that, maybe this is something I should go ahead and do. And it's been a really great honor. I really enjoy it. I'm simply there to provide my perspective, what my experiences through grief, and to kind of point people towards Christ. And it's been a real reward to see some people kind of, I'm going to church now. Some people start going to Kensington as a result of it. And it's awesome to see kind of spiritual growth in people who maybe haven't considered that before. We have his picture up. So
Yeah.
Lucy also
talks about him.
like Sammy.
Yeah.
She knows his name and knows what he looks like. And Charlie, he wants to feel close to his brother still a lot. So he'll have, he gets into some old costumes that Sammy had, and he'll always be like, did Sammy like Darth Maul? I'm like, yeah, Sammy liked Darth Maul. So he'll, I think it spearheads kind of some of his interests.
I think God has shown me that I need him to get through this. Also, how strong our family is to get through this.
He's still here for us. Even in the darkest time of our life, he never left. He was always there for us.
Yeah. And he's shown us how we can use our pain to help other people.
It's impossible to walk the earth for any number of years without experiencing a lot of pain. But we can rely on Jesus because he has overcome this world.
Yeah.
I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Stories like the Hines, or watching my brother and sister-in-law bury their son a number of years ago, or a friend of mine sitting in this service this morning who lost her daughter in the last few years and yet continue to run after Jesus, I feel like are the people who have some of the greatest, if not the greatest, credibility to say, your goodness never runs out. From a place of depth that you just can't understand any other way than God's goodness transcends everything, absolutely everything. And our grief share is just one of those kinds of things in a church like Kensington that I think you could easily overlook or never even be aware of. That's something that we're able to provide because of you. It's part of what we can do as a church to respond to ourselves, to our community in moments of suffering and pain because of your generosity. And part of what we want to do is celebrate that and also continue to say thank you for that. And I also want to let you know that for some of you, that may have stirred something in you that right now, nothing else that'll happen in this room is what you need today. Our grief share is actually here this morning out in the lobby, as well as a bolstered up prayer team that's out there. And so I want you to know, and I want you to feel freedom, if something stirred inside you, if that touched something inside you, that you go, man, I didn't need to hear anything else today. I don't want to hear anything else. Maybe the best thing that you'll do today, maybe the experience you need to be here for is not in this room. Maybe it's out in the lobby this morning. Maybe it's talking to somebody from our grief share team. Maybe it's talking with somebody from our prayer team and being prayed for. So I just want you to have a freedom. If now or if at any point in the morning you feel like, man, I actually need to be out there because what got stirred in here doesn't need to sit in this room, then feel free, then get up, then go. It's not just about what happens in here. It's about what happens within the context of this whole community. And maybe part of what some of you need today isn't in this room. Maybe it's out there. So feel the freedom to go do that. But I want to pray and ask that as we dive into just the scriptures and dive into our content for this morning, what I think God has, that he'd start to really be the one that speaks. We'd hear him, not me. So Father, we just come before you this morning and acknowledge that I do believe that your goodness, it runs after us and it cannot be exhausted and it transcends every experience in life that we could ever go through. As Paul said, to live is Christ and take it all away from me, even to die is then gain. Jesus, help us to know how to live in and understand that mystery. Because frankly, it doesn't make sense. Even when you say it out loud, it just doesn't make a lot of logical sense. To live as Jesus, to die as gain. And yet there is a mystery in doing life with you that sustains us, that fills us, that lifts us up, and transcends us above all things in this life. And so would you help us understand that and understand that even this morning in the context of this thing that you gave us called the Sabbath, which is where we learn to sit in a place of rest and restoration. And so I pray, God, that as we open up the pages of this book, that you would speak through it, through every word, through every punctuation, through every illustration, that God, you would help me as I speak to be faithful to Jesus Christ, faithful to this book, accurate to it all. And I pray that it'd be your voice that we hear. Meet us, I pray. Us wherever we are, close to you, far from you, don't know if there is a you. Do the great work that only you can do, that no person could ever do, to grab our hearts and our minds and give us what it is we need from you today, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, a couple other things just to let you know about. I told you I had a list of announcements today. We have, through Care Ministries, we have an event coming up called Surviving the Holidays. I don't know if you know about this, but the holidays can be a stressful time of year. Amen? Yeah, I don't know why I just said I've never done that before, ever. I don't know why. It's the one time I felt like the need to ask you to agree with me was about the difficulty of the holidays. All right, I don't know. They'll just let you into my world a little bit. So Surviving the Holidays right here at our Orion campus. This is a campus-wide event, but it's going to be hosted here the 15th. Anybody else know what happens on the 15th? Yeah, that's how I'm going to deal with my holiday season. But I would seriously, if you're going into the season, you're like, man, there's some tension, there's some memories, I don't know how to get back, there's some difficulties. This has been something we do that has really served a lot of people. I want to encourage you to that as well. Also to let you know, next week is Baptism Sunday for us. Super thrilled about that. It is a day where we celebrate God's movement to chase us and pursue us. Baptism is not a day where we say we've got it all right, we figured it all out, we're super religious. It's the day where we say he's everything. And because he's everything, I want to begin to follow him. That's all it is. It is an acknowledgement of saying we believe there is a God. Jesus is his name. He rose from the dead, and I'm going to follow him. I'm going to stumble along the way, but I'm going to follow him. And so a lot of you have been a part of those Sundays. Those are incredible days. Would love to invite you to think about, if you've not made this decision yet, to make this your weekend. So all you got to do is you can go online and sign up. You can also go out to our hub in the lobby and you can sign up there, but would love to have you be a part of that. Lastly, we are going to receive up our offering this morning, right? I knew they were waiting on me. They're like, is he going to do offering or is he going to forget it? I'm on it. So this morning we're going to take up our offering. If you're not familiar with the way that we do this, we do have things that we pass really quickly. They start at one end, they go all the way down to that aisle, they get passed back, go back again, and then sat on the ground. And then they'll collect them up from you. So again, I think it's been clear this morning, these are the moments that allow us to do so much of what we do as a church. And so I just say, as those go by, to those of you that are a part of this with us, thank you, thank you, thank you. To those of you that haven't yet decided whether or not you really want to get that next level of involvement in Kensington, I would just encourage you, try it. See how it goes, because I really do think, my family and I agree with this, we do this, our investment into the kingdom through this church is some of the greatest privilege that we have of what we get to do with the resources God's given us. So, all right, here we go. This morning, we're going to talk about the Sabbath, week 2 of our series. So let me ask you guys a question. How many of you, at some point last week, got super excited when you realized out of nowhere, holy crap, it's daylight savings and I get to change the clock back an hour? Like, anybody get surprised by that every year? You just don't pay attention because you don't care until the day of, except for the other one, because we all hate that one. Anybody last week had a moment where you're just like, oh, glory, I get a whole nother hour of sleep? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, a couple of you. How many of you, time for truth, just stayed up an extra hour and wasted it anyways? Right? That's totally what I did. My family and I were like, we get an extra hour of sleep. No, I think we stayed up an extra hour and a half, actually. How many of you could have used an extra hour of sleep today? Like, you would have loved daylight savings yesterday. That's like our whole production team this morning. Like, we're all trying to communicate in between yawns. How many of you are going home this afternoon to take a Sunday afternoon nap? Best day in the world to nap. How many of you in general just feel like you could use more sleep? Doesn't matter what day it is. Yeah. Okay, good majority of us. How many of you are wondering why the heck I'm carrying a pillow around right now? Because how many of you actually have moments, now careful with this one, PG, where you fantasize about this pillow? Well, not my pillow, this is my pillow. But you fantasize about a pillow. Like how many of you during the day, you have a moment from time to time where you think, the best part of my day is gonna be when I get to do this. Like anybody ever think that? Like you just literally get excited at the thought of putting your head to this thing. Like this is I slept on this last night and I brought it in only because, for two reasons. One, I thought since we're talking about rest and Sabbath, that maybe I'd lay it on the stage at some point and I'd just lay down on it and I'd give like 5 or 10 minutes of my message laying down on the stage. And I thought, no, that's gonna get really weird. I'm not gonna do that. But I brought it in because I wanted to illustrate that I am a pillow snob. Some of you are gonna be like me. I can't go anywhere where I sleep without taking my own pillow. Anybody else? Like the thought of sleeping on a pillow where somebody else has drooled all night, no thanks. Like you go to hotels and my wife is just like, I don't care, I don't mind. I'm like, you're a nasty human being, babe. Like I don't get you. I don't know why I said I do. Like what are you doing? Like I have to have my own pillow. Thankfully, the God of creation understands, not just understands our need and requirement for rest and sleep, it's part of what he actually wove into the very fabric of who we are from the beginning. So I'm gonna go back to Genesis, which is the beginning where it all started, and see. So this is chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the book of Genesis. It is the account of creation, and near the end of the account of creation, we read this, verse 31. And God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, and there was the 6th day. And thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all of their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. And so on the 7th day, he rested from his work. And then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from the work of creating that he had done. Everybody just say this with me. Just say rested. Do you feel it? How many of you would say you actually feel rested? Because here's what's interesting. God institutes this day of rest, and then all of creation begins to follow suit. Do you realize that there is not a single living creature that doesn't sleep? Everything in the animal kingdom sleeps. Even though sleep looks very different from thing to thing and creature to creature, everything sleeps. For example, the python. Anybody know how long the python sleeps? Of course you don't. Who would know that? You do? How long? 18 hours? You were absolutely right. She knew. 18 hours is how long a python sleeps. How about a giraffe? Anybody? Guesses? 30 minutes. Actually, very close. 30 minutes or upwards to like 2 hours. So some of you are like, that's my life right there. Then there's the horses. This is probably more like most of us. They sleep like 3 to 4 hours, but then they take 15-minute naps all throughout the day. That feels a little bit more like me. There is the koala that sleeps 20 to 22 hours a day. They are the teenagers of the animal kingdom. They never want to wake up or get out of bed. And then there is a particular species of snail. I did not know about this until this last week when I was like, how do animals sleep? There is a species of snail that it requires so much water that if it dries up just a little bit, it will go into a sleep for 3 years. 3 years. I don't even know what the human comparison is on that one, but 3 years of sleep. Now, here's the thing. We are a people that have been made for sleep and made for rest. But the problem is when we think about rest, I think what we tend to think about is sleep. Or maybe if we raise the bar a little bit more than just sleep, when we think about rest, we think about vacation. Here's a problem. They're not the same. Rest is not the same thing as sleep. Rest is not the same thing as vacation. And I can prove it to you. How many of you guys have ever had a full night's sleep and you still woke up the next day absolutely exhausted? How many of you have ever gone on vacation completely spent, and when you got home, you didn't feel any more energized than when you left? Within like 45 minutes of landing or by the next day at work, it's like everything got depleted. Or how many of you have You feel like your life has been connected to something that's kind of draining your soul? Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a relationship, fill in the blank, and you've gotten away from that thing, and yet your soul doesn't seem to replenish. And you kept telling yourself, that's what's draining me. If I just get away from that, then my soul will fill back up. And you get away from that, and it feels like your soul maybe takes a notch up, but that's it. And it doesn't feel like it recharges. Anybody? Like you get away from it? Right? That's because rest is not sleep. See, sleep, all it involves is this: a pillow. But rest involves a person. I want to show you what I mean, but we're going to have to take a little bit of a journey to do it. It started in Genesis, where God displays for us the example of resting, and he didn't instruct so much at this point. Like, you remember back in Genesis, we just read it, it said on the seventh day he rested. If you're a parent, you know those moments where you're trying to teach something without saying, do this? It's more of the caught-taught moment. You're just modeling it, you're showing it. That was Genesis. Well, here was the problem. We didn't get it. And so in the second book of the Bible, in the book of Exodus, God then instructs it and he commands it. Book of Exodus reads this way. Verse 8 of chapter 20. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath, and it is to the Lord. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor your foreigners residing in your towns. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath, and he made it holy. So God has this moment where he instructs us into this practice called the Sabbath, which is intended to be attached to what he began with in Genesis, which is rest. But we began to deviate away from that. So what starts to happen then is that in Jesus' time, the religious leaders, I think knowing how easy it is to wander away from this one, because if you didn't catch it, what he just did in the book of Exodus was this was where the 10 Commandments get laid out. This is the fourth of the 10 Commandments. This is one of the 10 things God says you desperately need. It's how I've made life to function. I would suggest, though, that this is the one of the 10 Commandments that while we need all of them, that we probably neglect the most, right? This is the one that we have the easiest time going, well, I don't really have time to give time. I don't really have time to slow down. I don't really have margin to do nothing. Because we're always in such a busy season of life. Anybody like Nicole and I realize that it's just always a busy season of life? I seriously think we've been saying that for 20 years now. Well, it's just a busy season of life. It's just a busy season of life. It's just a busy, like, is it ever going to not be a busy season of life? But could you imagine if we just so nonchalantly disregarded God's other commandments? Like stealing is one of them. Do you imagine if you were just like, you're just like a thief all of a sudden? You're just stealing whatever you want. You go into the grocery store and you just take it and you just go. And somebody's like, I don't think you're supposed to do it that way. And you're like, I'm just in a really needy season of life. I won't always be here. But for right now, it's just the way it goes. Needy season, I got to get going. Or murder. Murder's another one. Like, what if we just nonchalantly, you're like, hey, you killed your neighbor. You're like, I'm just in an angry season of life. I won't always be here, just where I'm at right now. Like, could you imagine if we just so nonchalantly disregarded these other invitations, these other instructions, these other commands of God? So here's what the Jewish leaders in Jesus' day did, because I think they realized the ease at which we could just disregard this one because it seems like it's less important than the others. And so they developed all these lists of rules of what you could and could not do on the Sabbath. And so they had this giant category of things that constituted work. And you were not allowed to do them on the Sabbath. The whole theory, obviously, is that if you weren't working, then you must be what? You must be resting. And so some of the craziest were, for example, you cannot carry anything. I mean, it gets nuts. I mean, to keep the list of things you can't do because it would be work actually ends up becoming more work than not working. So one of them is you can't carry anything. You can't write anything down. You can't use any lotions. There are even currently, right now today, there are certain sects of Judaism that are debating and arguing over whether or not flushing the toilet constitutes work. You can't brush your teeth because that's considered work. So there's this whole list of things that was developed as a way to say you can't do these because if you do, then they're work. So if you're not doing them, you must not be working. I didn't grow up in a Jewish home, but I did grow up in a pretty strict Baptist one. And we did similar things to try to legislate how the Sabbath should be kept and should be responded to. Ours was just simply, you can't do anything. So that's what it was. You can go to church all day long, like 85 services, but you can't do anything else. Like even going out to eat, you couldn't go out to eat. Because if you go out to eat, then it requires somebody else to do things, and so now you're making them break the Sabbath. And I'm like, well, it was just super weird. It's super frustrating. Like, that was the whole rule, is you just can't do anything. Here's the problem. Whether it's the religious leaders of Jesus' time or whether it's more modern attempt now, like mine growing up, to say, here's how to observe the Sabbath, it all misses the point. And it ends up turning the Sabbath from what God intended it to be. What it does is it ends up turning the Sabbath into something more legalistic than life-giving. You know, even Jesus, like it got so extreme in Jesus' time that there was a scenario where he healed somebody and he was criticized by the religious leaders because healing the person fell into the category of work, which he shouldn't have been doing on the Sabbath. So on your screens, I want you to actually see it. It's in the book of Mark, chapter 2. So Jesus is doing what he does. He's teaching, has an interaction with a man, and here's how it goes, verse 23 of chapter 2. And on the Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick up some of the heads of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, look, why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? And he answered them, have you ever read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? And in the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God, and he consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. So it's so critical that you follow the laws, that Jesus was criticized for healing people on the Sabbath, and then in this scenario, he even gets criticized for just allowing his disciples to pick grain because they were hungry, because that constitutes now work, because they picked something up. And so what he says next is absolutely critical. It reframes the understanding of the Sabbath. And it's such a reframing that to the Jewish listeners that would have heard this, especially the religious leaders, this would have been absolutely infuriating. Like, we'll read it and it's like, oh, okay. And some of you, you've maybe even heard it a dozen or more times. But you have to understand that to the readers and to the listeners of Jesus' time that would have heard this, this would have been completely upending of what they understood about the Sabbath. And then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord, even of the Sabbath. So two things that Jesus does here, which are significantly important in the understanding of the Sabbath, how to approach it, how to experience it, and what it does and creates. Number one is he says, the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, you don't serve this day. This day is intended to serve you. It is to be a gift to you. It is to be a deposit to you, not the other way around. So part of what he does immediately is he kind of takes away the legalism of it. The pass, fail, win, lose approach that people were taking towards the Sabbath. He removes that. He's like, no. You don't serve the Sabbath. I created this thing to be what serves you. It is a deposit to you. But then he says something next, this is where the Pharisees would have been like, kill him. Is he says, the Son of Man, which is a reference to himself, is the Lord of the Sabbath. What's important about that is he's not simply saying, I'm over the Sabbath, like I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, I'm over the Sabbath. What he's saying more appropriately is, I am the Sabbath. It's not a day. It's not an extra hour of sleep. I am the Sabbath. And this is where the Jewish leaders would have completely flipped out, because they knew the authority he was ascribing to himself and the authority he was taking away from this day that had become so crucial and critical to them, monitoring everybody else. See, I want you to hear me clearly. The Sabbath, and maybe you have a church background, maybe you don't have a church background. If you're like me, you grew up in a church that the idea was always that the Sabbath is a day, and it's a day where you just do nothing. The Sabbath is not intended to merely be a day where you do nothing. Here's what Sabbath is. If you're taking notes, this one's on your screen. I would encourage you to write it down. Sabbath is not simply a day of doing nothing. Sabbath is an intentionally regular pursuit of the presence of Jesus Christ, wherein he does something I can't explain, but supernaturally will fill up your tank in a way nothing else will. I don't care if you could sleep 3 years like the snail. It won't do what rest in the presence of Jesus can do. That's what Sabbath is. Let me show you another place where Jesus says this without saying it quite so clearly, but he says it. If you go over to the book of Matthew, Jesus says this. Chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. So Jesus, remember, the idea of Sabbath was about rest, and the idea of rest was about do nothing. And so what Jesus does here is in this conversation with the Pharisees, he says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And then in another situation, he says, if you want rest, where do you have to go? We just read it. Where do you got to go? Not a trick question. He says, me. Yeah. Come to me if you're weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. And he says the word rest twice. And the second time, he attaches a phrase, for your soul. Like anybody needs some rest that is the depth level of your soul, not just extra sleep, not just a little less stress, but something where you would say, holy smokes, like my soul just went relaxed. I can't explain how it works, but I'm telling you, the creator of the universe said, if you will pursue me, and if you will learn how to sit in my presence, I'm telling you, I will pour myself into you and fill up your cup in ways that nothing else will. I will penetrate to your soul and refresh it. It's not just about a day of doing nothing. That's why all throughout the Gospels, Jesus would say things like, I am the bread of life. I am the living water. Like he was constantly trying to teach this idea to us that he's what sustains us. He is the essence of life. He is the sustaining power of life. He can be our joy. He can be our hope. He can be our rest. He can be everything else that we so often try to find everywhere else. He says it's me. It's not just about a day of doing nothing. It is about intentionally, consistently pursuing encounter with me. That's Sabbath. That's rest. I'm going to show you a quick picture of what this looks like with two different sisters. Again, a story that maybe some of you are familiar with and have heard, but maybe for others of you it'll be new. Jesus and his disciples were on their way, and he came upon a village where a woman named Martha opened up her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So she came to him, she asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Verse 41, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. So you got to picture this scenario. So you had a dinner party. Martha's made the invitation. Martha say, hey, I'm opening up my home. Why don't you come over? So Martha initiates the invitation for him to come over, but what's Martha doing? Everything else but spending time with the guest of honor that she brought into her home. And she's completely frantic. Like you picture the scenario, like it says here that Jesus had at one point say to her, Martha, Martha, in response to her, hey, go tell my sister to get up. I don't think that's because he's like, Martha, Martha. I picture it more like she's running around frantic. He's like, hey, Martha. And she's like, oh, she's just busy. He's like, Martha. He's like trying to get her attention is the way I picture it. And here's Martha running around frantic, doing a whole bunch of different things, not paying attention, disconnected from the guest of honor in her home, and she's growing in irritation, very clear, right? Because she doesn't go to her sister and say, hey, Mary, would you mind, like a couple things, I could use your help. She goes to Jesus, she's like, hey, could you tell my lazy bum of a sister, maybe she could get up for 5 minutes and give me a hand? So she's going to Jesus, trying to get him to do her dirty work, to get her sister involved. You ever been in this place in life where you think you're standing in the right spot on an idea or a practice? And then something happens and you realize, oh, dang it, I'm the wrong one. Like this is that moment. Like Martha's like, hey, I'm in the right. I'm doing all the things that need to get done. My lazy sister over here ain't doing nothing. Maybe Jesus, you could ask her to get involved. He's like, Martha, Martha. And so he has this moment where he begins to correct her actually, instead of correcting her sister. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. So Martha's always gotten a bad rap in the church world. Like I don't know if you've been in the church world or the kind of church world long enough that you've ever had somebody say things like, don't be a Martha. Like the church I grew up in, Martha was always synonymous with just being a busybody or being distracted or all the things that she's doing right here. There were literally people that would say that to us, like in the church I grew up, you don't want to be a Martha, which is like the weirdest thing. If anybody, I've just resolved myself, if anybody this point forward ever says, don't be a Martha to me, my response is going to be, don't be a Karen. I'm so waiting to use that line. I'm like, please, Lord, let somebody say that to me. Anyways, but Martha, like, let's give her a break for a minute. Like, the only reason there's work for Martha to do is because why? Jesus came over. So it's like, wait a minute. What do you mean I'm the one that needs to chill out? Yeah, I'm doing this for you. You came over my house and I got work to do because of you. There would be no work if it wasn't for Jesus being in her home. So she's all distracted, she's frustrated, she's leaning in, but she's getting done the stuff that needs to get done. Here's where I feel for Martha. She's not an evil woman, she's not a wicked woman, she's not doing a bunch of stuff she shouldn't be doing. She's taking care of business. She's doing things that are important. She's doing things that are important specifically as a result of God being in her home. So there's a part of me that, I get Martha. Don't we get Martha? Yeah, I mean, more than get her, we are her, aren't we? Because, I mean, look at any of your calendars. Look at any of your schedules, mine included, guarantee. There is 100+ things on any given day that are important things that you have to do. That if somebody were to say to you, settle down, just take something off your calendar. People say that to me all the time. And I look and I go, I don't know what to take off my calendar. Like, everything on my calendar is important. It's not like I'm going, my life isn't busy because I'm like, well, I've got all the really dumb, insignificant things that I just got to do today. No, my life is busy because I've got a lot of things that to me, to my life, to my family, they are important things, and you're the same. We've all got calendars that are packed with tons of things that are just important things. Here's the thing I wonder, though, if I were to look at your calendar or you look at mine, and all of the things that rest on it, is there evidence of creating margin for rest? Is there evidence of rest or just a lot of busyness? And you know how to tell if there's no evidence of margin for rest? Is that your life possesses the same two things that Jesus said to Martha. Martha, Martha, you are worried and you are upset about a whole lot of things. I wonder for many of us how much of our week would be defined by worry and upset, by stress and irritation, by being anxious and frustrated. Because to the degree that your week is full of stress and irritation is a reflection of the fact that we probably, in all the important things that we have to get done, haven't figured out the margin and the space for rest. And so this is where Jesus tries to lean in and help her figure out how to prioritize the list. He says to her, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things. And he says this, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one. Now I read this, and Jesus says, only one thing is needed. And there's a part of me that's like, must be great to be a rabbi. Well, must be nice. All I do is one thing. I just travel around and preach. That's all I do. Good for you, Jesus. Because, I mean, let's be honest. I look at my life. You look at your life. I don't have one thing to do. There's no way I could narrow my life down to one thing. I've got a whole lot of important things to get done, just like you do. We all wear different hats. My hat as a dad, my hat as a husband, my hat as a pastor, my hat as a leader, my hat is the hobbies that I enjoy. All these different hats that I have that I wear, they're important. And they produce important things that have to get done. But here's what's critical and you can't miss and why language is so important. Jesus doesn't say there's only one important thing. He says there's only one needed thing. Needed and important are very different. It's important to pay your bills. Breathing is needed. Like there is a difference in life between what's important and what's needed. And I would say this, the relationship between the two, if you neglect what is important, if you neglect what's needed, you'll fail what's important. If you give priority to what's needed, you will produce what's important. And so Jesus doesn't say to her, oh, Martha, all this stuff on your list, all these things you're trying to get done, they're not important. He doesn't do that. He knows that she has important things. He knows we have important things. What he says is, amongst your important, there is one thing needed. And her sister seems to get it. One last time. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. What's Mary doing? She's sitting at the feet of Jesus. I highly doubt that later that day, when Jesus was gone and the crowd had dissipated and Martha was beginning the busyness of cleaning up, I highly doubt that Mary was still just going, hey, good for you, Martha. I'm just going to sit. I'm just going to soak in the moment that was. I mean, I'm sure she got to work. I'm sure she did things. I'm sure she got busy as well. I'm sure she laid her attention to the important things as well. But in that moment, what she gave attention to is the one thing that only has the power to refresh our soul and give it rest, and that was intentionally sitting in the presence of Jesus. That's rest. That's what I believe is really about Sabbath and what God's trying to lead us into when he says, observe the Sabbath. So here's my question for you. Emmy, for us, how many of us right now are giving attention to 100 things that are important and neglecting the one thing that's needed? Our world has created a really weird sense of what's normal. Normal is fast-paced, go, 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 put another thing on the calendar, take the other obligation, responsibility, yes to another soccer level up, another sport level up. It's more, do. Go. Like, it's so much so that if somebody were to tell you that they're resting and sleeping, what do we usually think of them? Yeah, this is so funny because all of us were like earlier, I would love extra sleep. But if somebody came to you this afternoon and was like, man, I slept like 10 hours today, you're like, lazy bum, good job. Right? So we have this like weird relationship with rest where we know we need it, but then we criticize it. Why? Because we've created this bizarre sense of normal in our life. Normal is irritated. Normal is living stressed out. Normal is just more, do, go. Normal is no margin. I would suggest to you, normal is killing us. Sabbath is very different. Sabbath is saying, I'm going to keep the main thing the main thing. Sabbath is saying, I'm going to keep the main thing at the top of the list so it doesn't get put to the bottom of the list. Sabbath is saying, I will intentionally say no to some things so that I can say yes to the right things. Sabbath might mean that there's times that you say no to the promotion, that you say no to the friend, that you say no to the good opportunity. Not that they're not important things, but so that you can say yes to what's needed so that ultimately you can also do what's important. Because I'm telling you, you neglect what's needed, you'll fail what's important. Every time. That's what Sabbath is. And that's what Jesus is trying to invite us into, is not simply a day of do nothing, but to be with him. And not like I'm not saying like go be a monk. Like I remember having this conversation with somebody once and wrestling it with myself, trying to figure out, what do I get out of my calendar? And they look at me and go, well, it's not like I can be a monk and go live in a cave and hum. I'm like, okay, I can't either, newsflash. Like this isn't like some weird go be religious and just live alone and isolate yourself and just go figure out how to do nothing and minimalize everything. Like you have a job, I have a job, you have things, you have sports events, your kids have responsibilities and you've got to get them here and you've got to get there and there's something to fix all the time around the house. Like we get that. Here's my plea to you this morning, and it is as much a plea to myself. In the midst of all of the things that are important, please do not neglect what's needed. Find the time, make the space, create the margin where you can sit at the soul refreshing feet of Jesus. Because I'm telling you what you already know, this world will drain you and I dry, and it will not take advantage of giving to you rest. It will take it from you. It's your job, my job, to guard our hearts. It's my job, your job, to guard our margins, to guard our calendars. And I'm telling you, nothing but sitting at the feet of Jesus has the ability and the power to remove weariness, to remove exhaustion, and to replace it with rest. So the question is, how do we do that? So for those of you that are taking notes, you're like, aren't we kind of at the end? And you haven't filled in half the blanks. Ready? Here we go. There's no perfect way to sit at the feet of Jesus, but I can't send you out of here and just let that be an ethereal thing. Go sit at the feet of Jesus. Like, I don't know, I'm way too practical. I'm like, how do we do that? So I want to give you a couple things that for me are a part of the intentional practice of sitting in the presence of Jesus. Because it'd be great if we could see him physically, personally, right here, right now. But here's how I have learned to encounter him. These aren't all the ways, but there's some of the important ways. Number one is that I have to learn to listen for the voice that stands out from the rest of the voices. Like when you're trying to pursue Jesus and get in a space and a place where you can just listen, because that's sitting at his feet, right? That's what Mary's doing. Mary's not sitting there talking. It said Mary, this is important, sat there listening. So if you're going to get in a space, we're going to try and listen to the voice of God speak to you, which he does, which he will, which he longs to, then you're going to hear a lot of other competing voices. You're going to hear your own voice in your head. You're going to hear your boss's voice in your head. You're going to hear all kinds of different voices in your head. You know this. When it gets quiet, it gets noisy, right? And so part of what I have to learn to do is to distinguish God's voice over all the other voices. So for the next couple of days, I, like probably many of you, or some of you at least, I'm going to be sitting in a tree in a lot of quiet. And one of the things that, it doesn't matter how many years I've been hunting, which is probably close to 30 now, no matter how many years I have hunted, every time I hear a squirrel run through the woods, I think I hear a deer. Every time. Even though I know, I've told my son this 100 times. He's like, Dad, how do you know when you hear a deer? I'm like, well, son, when you hear a deer, it's not a deer. Like, you don't. You won't. I don't know how those 300-pound animals can walk through the woods embedded with crunchy leaves and make no noise, but they do. But the squirrels, somehow they come plowing through the woods like a Volkswagen with all 4 flat tires. And every year I sit up there and I convince myself, oh, there's a big one over my right shoulder. It's going to be the biggest buck I've ever seen. It's a squirrel. I may or may have not put down a few squirrels in my day, but they were bad squirrels. They had it coming. Noisy squirrels. I have to learn sitting in the woods to distinguish all the different noises, to be able to tune my ear to the one that so often is the most quiet but the most rewarding. And so do you when it comes to God. So do we when it comes to God. We've got to learn to tune our ear. How do you tune your ear to God's voice? His voice tends to be the one that's refreshing, encouraging, uplifting, gentle, loving. He's not the critical, condemning, self-loathing voice that tends so often to roll in most of our heads. Even when it has to be a correctional voice, it's comforting. It's like a parent coming up and just putting their tender arm around you and saying, hey, can we have a moment? It's not a moment where you walk away feeling shamed or guilt. So first thing I got to do if I'm going to sit at his feet is I've got to realize there's going to be a lot of voices, and I've got to do a little bit of work to listen for his among the rest. Number 2 is that if I'm going to sit at his feet, it usually needs to be a quiet space. Now, for me, I grew up in a family with 9 people. So I have a hard time with quiet. And this thing, like some of you, never stops. I love those of you. I also envy you that can somehow just like shut your brain off. Like you're the people that the minute your head hits the pillow, you're done. Like I can't do that. I sleep after like an hour of thinking through all these things. So when I try to get quiet, like there's just too much going on in here. So for me, part of being quiet means I've got to create something that blocks out the noises. So here, I'm just going to show you a couple of resources right now that have served me. This is one, you can look this up on Spotify, probably on Apple Music as well. It's called Soaking in His Presence by William Augusto. This is a playlist of just ambient music. And some of the playlists are like 10 minutes. I think there's one that's like 15 hours. I don't know if you're sitting there for 15 hours, but do what you got to do. I may in the tree. But there's just some great opportunity to listen to just this beautiful music. It's kind of almost in the background of your mind. But for me, it helps kind of clear out all the other noise at the same time. So whatever getting silent is, if it's using a resource or if it's genuine silence, if you're going to sit in the presence of Jesus, soak up the Sabbath rest he offers, you got to figure out how to create a little bit of block of all the other noise in your life. I think you also have to figure out maybe sometimes how to allow someone else to guide you a little. Like I don't always know what to do. If I'm sitting there, sometimes it's just like, okay, God, go ahead and talk. And I don't always do, okay, sometimes there's days where I'm like, should I read? Should I not read? Should I write something down? So there's a few resources I use that just help put me in a place that guide me into this book, particularly into these scriptures. So I'll put a few of them on the screen. One of them is called Abide. Dwell will be next. So these are 2 apps that do a little bit of the same thing, but it's just a kind of a guided devotion. There's different devotionals, there's different scripture readings, and somebody can read them for you. So there's just different ways that you can either read or have it read for you. One of my new favorites, you take a picture of that, and go to the next one, So this is called the Dwell app. So Dwell is literally just the Bible. And here's what's really cool about this one. You can pick all these different voices to read it to you. You can also pick all kinds of different background music. So for me, my favorite is, there's an African voice named Felix. So I use him and I use this ambient music. I don't know what it is for me, especially ever since I went to Kenya. There's just something soothing about the African accent. And so I just love, me and Felix, like I just love it. I put Felix on and ambient and I just sit there and that brother just preaches a word to me. And that's part of how I sit in the presence of Jesus. And then last, I would just give you this, is it needs to be focused. Psalm 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God. There is a certain ability to know God that only comes through stillness. And now sometimes part of being still might mean that you need to go take a walk. Like maybe you just can't actually do this, it's like you're too fidgety, so go take a walk. That might help create a little bit of soul stillness, but it means that you just can't be doing 35 other things at the same time. You can't multitask and try and sit at the feet of Jesus. This is why, and for some of you, you'll disagree with me, this is why I just don't think that to drive into work or away from work is the greatest time to try and sit with Jesus. There's just too much of multitasking, changing lanes, speeding up, slowing down, miss that exit, getting mad at other drivers. Hey, way to go, idiot. So Lord, I just really am asking that you'd make me the person you want me to be. And it doesn't work for me. So I have to have a little bit more focus if I'm trying to sit at the feet of Jesus. It doesn't mean I'm just perfectly still, but it does mean that I'm not doing 85 things at the same time. Here's the bottom line. Our world is exhausted. There's all kinds of stats that I was going to read, and I just chose not to. An article from Psychology Today. Our world is absolutely exhausted at a level right now that we've never known. But here's the good news. There is rest for our souls. But the only place in all of creation that can provide rest that goes to the level of the soul is leaning into the presence of the Creator of creation. So God, I just pray that you would help us to understand the invitation of the Sabbath that you've invited us into, what it means that you are the bread of life, you are the living water, you are the one and only one who restores our souls. Do something, I pray, God, to invite us all at the depth of who we are into a deeper place with you, that we would find ourselves more filled up, able, as we give attention to the one thing that's needed, to invest ourselves more healthily into all that's important. In Jesus' name, amen.
Your love sustaining me before I even knew what love was. You brought me here to rest and given me space to breathe. So I'll stay still until it sinks in. And I will lean back in your loving arms of a beautiful Father. And breathe deep and know that He's good. For He's a love like no other. will lean back in your loving arms of a beautiful Father. And breathe deep and know that He's good. He's a love like no other. I will lean back. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. And I'll breathe deep and know that He's good. He's a love like no other. I'm breathing deep, all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. Oh, I can see your love is better than all the others that I see. And I'm breathing deep, all of your goodness, your love and kindness to me. Oh, now I can see, oh, your love is better than all the others that I see. And I'm breathing deep, all of your goodness, your love and kindness to me. Oh, I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. And I will breathe deep and know that He is good, that He's a love like no other. Oh, and I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I will breathe deep and know that He's good. He's a love like no other. Oh, He's a love like no other.
That's always our greatest hope. Doesn't matter what the message is, doesn't matter what the music is, doesn't matter what the series is. Our greatest hope is that you would continue, together, we would continue to grow, to realize there is a love like no other. Man, my background growing up in church, God was angry, God was distant. I don't know what God is to you, but I know for most people I talk to, He's not loving. He's not chasing after you with affection and tenderness. But when you continue to understand that and sit in that, that changes everything. So we still have our prayer team here this morning. If we can serve you as you walk out, they're going to be in the lobby, and a few of them will also be up here at the front. Remember all the incredible opportunities we have over the next couple of weeks for you to engage, to learn to meet new people here, to fall into new relationships, and continue to experience the pursuit of God for you. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you next weekend.
Thank you.